1980, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When the 2020s drag you down, nostalgia is the fix. What awaits the rising sunland in year number 7 of the neon decade? How about the bold rebrand of one of Japan's most iconic drink makers? The completion of one of the wildest urban redevelopment projects ever attempted? A genre-defining milestone in role-playing game history? The debut of one of the most legendary game shows ever created? One of the decade's most heartbreaking pop music tragedies? A series of fatal accidents that changed Japanese advertisement forever? And plenty more. Sounds good? Then sit back, relax, and allow me to take you back to Japan in 1986. A year when, if such things had existed, like buttons certainly would have been mashed, subscribe buttons smashed, and patreon.com/anikihistory checked out by anyone desperate to dodge YouTube advertisement for as little as $1 per month. Trust me, hating ads was a thing 40 years ago. For now though, let's see what else the Japanese of 1986 were up to, shall we? Ikimashou! Let's do this! What better way to ring in a new year than by reinventing how Japan gets gloriously, unapologetically wasted? On January 21st, Asahi Breweries set out to do just that when they launched their wildly ambitious New Century plan. A last-ditch effort to breathe new life into a company that had been slipping pretty hard as of late. The roots of Asahi Breweries stretch all the way back to 1889, when Japan collectively realized, hey, maybe sake isn't the only way to get absolutely obliterated. Let's give this beer thing that the gaijin loves so much a spin. And it worked. For a while, Asahi slowly grew into what became one of the biggest contenders in the country's post-war beer boom. But by the mid-1980s, yikes. Their market share dipped below 10% for the first time. Ever since 1961, they'd been stuck in third place behind competitors Kirin and Nippon Beer. But then, when Suntory started threatening to bump them down to 4th place, Asahi essentially went, nope, absolutely not, and hired turnaround specialist Murai Tsutomu, the man credited with just recently saving car manufacturer Mazda, to rebuild the company from the ground up. Enter the New Century plan. New products, a massive surge in advertising, nationwide sales pushes. They even ditched their almost 100-year-old emblem, a design that honestly screams Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, and replaced it with this modern logo, which I think we all instantly recognize these days. And guess what? It worked. Market share climbed. By 2001, Asahi had become Japan's #1 beer once again for the first time in 48 years. See, not all rebrands have to be a complete and utter disaster. A month later, on February 21st, came the death of a Japanese world record holder. Maybe. Izumi Shigechiyo was old. And I mean like, really old. According to an 1871 family register found in his hometown on Tokunoshima Island, he was born on June 29, 1865, which would have made him an unbelievable 120 years old when he passed away in early 1986. Not only is that an age very few humans even come close to reaching, it was also historic. Izumi became the first human ever confirmed to reach the age of 120. Except, yeah, maybe not. His Guinness World Record was revoked in 2010 because ever since at least 1980, there had been discussions and serious doubts about the accuracy of Tokunoshima's Meiji period family documents, a debate that went on for years and years. But the basic takeaway from the skeptics was this: Izumi Shigechiyo was more likely 105 years old when he died, not 120. I mean, anyone can do 105. Still, whether Izumi truly hit 120 or not, one thing hasn't changed. The oldest man ever recorded is still, you guessed it, Japanese. And the second oldest woman ever recorded? Also Japanese. So basically, the people of Japan do have some serious longevity, Well, as long as their family records aren't lying to them. Speaking of things you should doubt, the safety of mass-produced electronics. Enter Sanyo Electric. On February 24th, the company's president resigned after 15 years at the top, following a disaster that also unintentionally invented a modern Japanese advertising staple, the apology commercial. Back in 1984, Sanyo released its kerosene fan heater model CFH S22 1F. At first glance, this thing is just another heater. But there was a problem. A design flaw within the product caused carbon monoxide poisoning in several households across Japan. In total, 45 people were affected, and 4 tragically died. Sanyo announced a recall in July of 1985 through newspaper ads, and after months without regular commercials, they returned to Japanese television with something entirely different. Dry, somber ads calmly explaining the defect, apologizing sincerely, and urging customers to return their ticking time bomb Sanyo heaters. It was just as much of a PR disaster as it was groundbreaking. The Sanyo president's resignation on February 24, 1986 was emblematic of the massive fallout within the company, which led to a massive internal overhaul, practically a second founding of the company. As for those seemingly inconspicuous apology ads that flickered across Japanese television sets in early 1986 though, they became somewhat of a blueprint. When Panasonic and National faced their own deadly heater scandals in 2009, they followed the Sanyo playbook, and that's just one of many examples. And hey, apparently there's some kind of lost media hunt for variants of the original Sanyo apology spots going on. People really can be passionate about anything. What way more people should be passionate about is equality. And on April 1st, Japan made a major attempt to move in that direction when the Equal Employment Opportunity Law officially took effect. The purpose of this law was pretty straightforward: stop workplace discrimination based on gender. For the first time ever, Japanese companies were legally barred from discriminating based on gender in hiring, training, and promotions. The law also addressed issues like pregnancy protections, required time off, night shift considerations, and much more, expanded further through later revisions. Was it perfect? Not even close. They inadvertently created a two-track system where women basically had to choose between a promotion-worthy managerial track parallel to men, or a stable, more flexible, but ultimately advancement-block general employee track was eventually used by Japan's largest employers and brought with it some pretty heavy criticism of the new law. And rightfully so. But still, the Equal Employment Opportunity Law of 1986 at least laid some very vital groundwork. For many women, it opened doors that had long been welded shut, and compared to many other countries in the mid-1980s, Japan at least tried. And for that, I give them an A for effort. Just a week later though, the country found itself mourning a young star whose future had seemed limitless. Okada Yukiko was only 18 when on April the 8th, she passed away as the result of a self-inflicted act at the Sun Music building in Yotsuya, Tokyo. The shock was immediate and enormous. Less than 3 months earlier, she had released her 8th single, Kuchibiru Network, written by Matsuda Seko and composed by Sakamoto Ryuichi, a song that hit #1 on the Japanese charts. She looked poised to become the next big thing in Japanese pop. The reasons behind her tragic decision, however, they remain unknown despite years of speculation. But her passing did force a painful reckoning. An overdue conversation about the darker, exploitative pressures placed on young idols in Japan's entertainment industry, which may or may not have had a hand in Okada's untimely death. Behind the cute costumes and the cheerful songs, not everything in idol pop is light and bright. In a way, Okada Yukiko's story became a symbol of those hidden struggles. A talented young artist, gone far too soon. Rest in peace, Yukiko-chan.
コマーシャルタイムです。
ついに発明泡の出る缶ビール。 そうか調べてみよう。サントリー生ビール泡缶新発売。
おう。
ごめんなさい。
元気さんまだ無理だ。そしてやろうよ。
やりたい。
Roll out the papier-mâché boulders, soap up the slopes, and gather Japan's bravest or most unhinged contestants. Because on May 2nd, 1986, the country was blessed with one of the greatest, most influential game shows ever created. Takeshi's Castle. For the very first time that day, Kitano Takeshi, then one of Japan's top comedians and future world-class filmmaker and actor, invited the nation to watch around 100 hopeful challengers attempt a gauntlet of increasingly absurd, occasionally terrifying, and always hilarious trials.
How do you feel now?
Fail and you go home. Succeed and you advance. Make it all the way to the end, and you would storm Takeshi's actual castle for one final showdown. Brilliant stuff. The challenges themselves were varied, chaotic, and perfectly ridiculous. Exactly what you would want from a Japanese game show, but dialed up to 11. People slipped, flew, face-planted, rolled, crashed, laughed, and got up again. And amazingly, the show reportedly only ever recorded minor injuries. Takeshi's Castle ended up running for only around 4.5 years, ending in October of 1990. But its impact? Massive. From Denmark to Brazil, from Germany to Iran, from Australia to Italy. If you're someone who grew up in the 80s or the 90s, then you or someone in your friend group is sure to remember catching that one weird Japanese show on TV at some point, and loving it. Turns out slapstick, tumbling bodies, and giant foam obstacles are a universal language. Two days later, on May the 4th, we trade Castle for politics as Japan hosted the 12th G7 summit in Tokyo. Topics included global finance, Cold War tensions, exchange rates, you know, the usual snooze-inducing stuff. The summit came on the heels of the 1985 Plaza Accord, the famous agreement that dramatically weakened the US dollar against major currencies, including the Japanese yen. Many economists argue that the Plaza Accord helped set the stage for Japan's infamous late 80s asset bubble. But beyond economics, the G7 was also a chance for Japan to show off. And 1980s Japan loved to show off. One can only imagine the G7 summit after party. Helmut Kohl at the izakaya, Margaret Thatcher dominating arcade cabinets. Hell yeah. Unfortunately, they all just missed a moment that would change Japanese pop culture forever. Because on May 27th, Chunsoft and Enix released a little game called Dragon Quest. Nowadays, Japanese RPGs are a global force, but in the mid-1980s, the genre was still dominated by American developers. But Dragon Quest was the game that flipped the script. Inspired by the Western RPG wizardry, director Nakamura Koichi and designer Hori Yuji set out to finally bring RPGs to Japan big time. They simplified complex mechanics, made the whole thing easy to play on a controller, and launched the game on the Famicom, the perfect platform to bring their game to a mainstream audience. The cherry on top of this delicious JRPG sundae, an art style provided by the amazing, the legendary Toriyama Akira. Man very much in his prime and right in the middle of creating the wildly popular Dragon Ball series. At first, Dragon Quest sales were rather slow, but the game eventually gained momentum and eventually sold 1.5 million copies in its domestic market alone. The sequels, however, they exploded in popularity, especially Dragon Quest III. Its release so influential that Japan literally had to switch DQ launches to Saturdays just to stop kids from skipping school. Insane. With the release of the original Dragon Quest, however, a JRPG legend was born, and it all began on May 27th, 1986. The day after the release of DQ1 though, Tokyo got itself a shiny new real-life playground to explore when Ark Hills officially wrapped construction. This absolute unit of a project wasn't just another patch of offices and concrete, it was an attempt to reboot the entire Akasaka district of Tokyo with what was at the time some of the most cutting-edge architecture the capital had ever seen. The 5-star ANA Intercontinental Hotel is only the appetizer. The complex also came with its own TV studio, a lively open plaza, and of course Suntory Hall, a world-class concert hall so acoustically perfect that musicians the world over still gush about it today. All of that good stuff sits nestled between a whole lineup of sleek structures: the Ark Tower's luxury apartments, the Ark Hills Executive Tower, and many more. Spread across 5.6 hectares, that's about 14 acres, Ark Hills steadily grew into one of the busiest hubs in the city. But even at launch in 1986, it was recognized as Japan's first and largest private urban redevelopment complex ever. And while the build itself took only about 3 years, the Mori Building Company had been plotting this thing since all the way back in 1967. For them, Ark Hills was both a trophy project and a prototype for things to come, because the Hills lineage that reshaped modern Tokyo, including Roppongi Hills in 2003, as well as Toranomon Hills and Asabudai Hills, both in 2023, all trace their DNA back to this one place. But the original, the blueprint, the granddaddy of them all, that honor still belongs to Ark Hills, born in a pastel-colored class of 86. Then on June 6th, one of the big boys of Japanese gaming journalism hit store shelves when Famicom Tsushin, known today simply as Famitsu, released its very first issue. The whole thing actually started back in 1982 as a small Famicom-focused column inside an add-on to the ASCII computer magazine called Login. But it got so popular that at some point, it just had to graduate into its own bi-weekly publication. Problem was, the competition wasn't sleeping. Family Computer Magazine, for instance, had already been out for close to a year and doing quite well for itself too. Meanwhile, Famicom Tsushin's debut sales, just 200,000 out of 700,000 printed, made it clear that this would not be a smooth ride. 200,000 out of 700,000. I mean, Jesus. And that was with features on Dragon Quest and this cool little section on the top 10 NES games in the US. Wait, $25 for a brand new game? We used to be a proper society, man. Yes, I'm aware of inflation. Anyway, instead of folding, get it? Folding, because it's a magazine made of paper. The Famicom Tsushin crew doubled down. More pages, more features, better reporting, and in October 31st, 1986 issue, they unleashed something that would become their calling card: the cross review. 4 reviewers, 4 scores out of 10, added up for that now iconic out of 40 score. Meanwhile, their now iconic mascot Neki the Fox trotted onto the scene in the September 5th issue. I mean, just look at the guy. He's got that dog in him. All in all, these upgrades paid off massively. The mag soon found an audience that stuck around long enough for the magazine to go weekly instead of bi-weekly in 1991. Then came the big rebrand. In 1995, Famicom Tsushin officially shortened its name to simply Famitsu, also mirroring its shift away from being a Nintendo-only publication and embracing the rapidly growing multi-platform world. And because it adapted, Famitsu didn't just survive, it became the most influential gaming magazine in Japan, bar none. Meanwhile, the legendary 40 out of 40 perfect score, still one of the rarest honors in the industry. Only about 30 games have pulled it off in nearly 4 decades. But how about what happened on July 1st when Fujifilm decided to just go and flip the entire photography game on its head? That day, they introduced the world to their shiniest new invention, the Fujicolor Utsurundesu, the world's very first commercially available disposable camera. In the West, you might know it as the Fujicolor Quick Snap, but whatever you want to call it, this thing was the little cardboard champ that could. See that tiny little label, film with lens? That's basically the whole pitch. A Fujicolor Super HR100 roll stuck behind a simple lens and shutter, and congratulations, you just made photography history. Almost offensively simple, and despite weighing basically nothing, just 75 grams, it could actually take some pretty decent pics too, if you had the necessary skill. You'd snap your shots, hand it over to your local photo place, wait a bit, and voila! The Utsurundesu blew the doors of how everyday people in Japan captured their memories. Before long, these little cardboard companions were basically everywhere and could be yours for just 1,380 yen or around $8. Suddenly, if you stumbled upon a moment worth saving but didn't have your big chunky camera on hand, no problem. As long as a shop nearby sold the Utsurundesu, you were golden. And it wasn't just Japan that fell in love, because once Fujifilm launched it abroad as the Quick Snap, it became a full-blown generational hit. By 2010, a mind-melting 1.4 billion disposable Fujifilm cameras had been sold. And yep, they still make them. Go figure. Across 7 different generations, the Utsurundesu / Quick Snap picked up all kinds of upgrades along the way. But the one we're talking about here, an original, born in Japan in the year of our Lord 1986. And speaking of OGs from 86, here's one more, but this one sadly left us on July 31st. Sugihara Chiune was, honestly, kind of a badass. Back in 1934, during Japan's occupation of Manchuria, he straight up quit his job as deputy foreign minister because he refused to be a part of the mistreatment of Chinese civilians. Now, that alone would be noteworthy, but his true legendary moment came a bit later, deep in the madness of World War II. By 1940, he was stationed in Lithuania as the Japanese vice consul. Right place, right time, horrifying circumstances. Seeing Jewish families fleeing persecution with nowhere to go, Sugihara broke ranks, ignored Tokyo's orders, and used his position to start writing transit visas by hand to get them out of there. And he did not do this halfway or something. For over a month, he wrote for 18 to 20 hours per day, creating anywhere from 2,100 to 6,000 visas between mid-July and late August, depending on who you ask. Peak Japanese work ethic, but used for something unambiguously good for once. Thanks to this man's hard work, thousands of Jewish refugees managed to escape Europe through Japan, which also led to the creation of a nickname for Sugihara. The Japanese Schindler. The Japanese Foreign Office was probably unaware of just how many visas he created, but let's just say they weren't thrilled. He was quietly dismissed in 1947. Now, losing your job does suck, but saving thousands of lives in the process? Probably worth it, if you ask me. As for his passing in 1986, a sad moment of course, but it also brought a renewed attention to what he did, and in many cases finally gave him the recognition he deserved. Monuments, honors, streets named after him, all that good stuff. Sugihara Chiune was and always will be an absolute legend. Full stop. Yet another milestone moment from 1986 hit on September 6th, when Doi Takako broke new ground as the first woman ever to lead a major political party in Japan. Doi was an interesting character. Ordinary in many ways, the opposite of ordinary in others. Being an unmarried, career-driven woman with no kids in her late 50s, now that alone already made her stand out in 1980s Japan. But all that as a top-tier politician? Practically unheard of at the time. But she wasn't just a novelty. She was smart, charismatic, sharp as a tack. Her taking over the Japanese Socialist Party on September 9th was historic and transformative. The party had just revamped its constitution, softened its stance, and suddenly became way more appealing to the public. Combine that with Doi Takako's mainstream popularity and the ruling LDP tripping over scandals left and right, and the mid to late 80s became a rare golden age for the socialists in Japan. By 1989, they were pulling in some of their best results ever, even doubling their vote counts in some races. As for Doi Takako herself, she came this close to becoming Japan's first female prime minister more than 30 years before the country actually got one. Almost, but not quite. Still, she shook the system hard, and that alone makes her one of the most memorable political figures in Japan of the decade, hands down.
コマーシャルタイムです。
December 9th ended up being an absolute tabloid fever dream when Kitano Takeshi, yeah, that Takeshi with the game show and the castle, landed himself in handcuffs in spectacular fashion. This was years before he leaned into playing tough guys in his own Yakuza-themed films, but perhaps he leaned into the whole method acting thing a few years too early. Here's what went down. On December the 8th, a Friday magazine reporter on the hunt for a good piece of gossip had harassed and lightly injured a university student Kitano was intimately involved with. Understandably furious, Kitano phoned the Friday offices and basically said, "I'm paying you guys a little visit." And sure enough, at around 3 AM that same night, he and 11 of his loyal disciples rolled up to Friday HQ, where things escalated quickly. The editor-in-chief tried to flex by claiming he had karate training. Kitano did not appreciate that, and tensions shot through the roof. After some heated back and forth, Takeshi and his crew unloaded a fire extinguisher on the staff, and then went full chaos mode. Punches, umbrellas, cracked ribs, the works. Naturally, Kitano Takeshi ended the night at the Otsuka police station. Fast forward 7 months, an 8-month ban from television, and a ton of media frenzy later, Kitano had earned himself a cozy 6-month prison sentence. Friday magazine caught some heat for their sleazy reporting too, but if you know Friday, you know that they would trade a few broken ribs for a massive celebrity scandal any day of the week. Kitano-san, you kinda walked right into that one. Maybe stay in that castle next time, my dude. And finally, to close out this absolutely packed year, December 31st and the 28th Japan Record Awards. The sparkling, big hair shoulder pad explosion were the Japanese music industry's heavy hitters descended on the Nippon Budokan to snag up some honors and trophies. The big winner that year? Nakamori Akina, who won Best Artist and the grand prize of the show for her record Desire Chonetsu, marking her 2nd year in a row winning the show's top honor. Best vocal performance went to Kitajima Saburo for Kitano Ryoba. Newcomer of the year went to Ishii Akemi. And Matsuda Seiko, busy having a child and all that, made her first stage appearance in over a year to receive her Album of the Year award for Supreme. Honestly, not the worst way to cap off 1986 and step into 1987 in style. That, as you probably guessed by now, is where we too are heading next. What does 87 hold in store for us? Well, I guess you'll just have to tune in next time to find out. Until then, consider becoming a member of this fine list of very kind people over at patreon.com/anikihistory, including the Hockey Channelman, D Fox, Saikajo, Khalid Lepda, Xoyabu, Tricoat, Javier Soravia, Steve Matsui, Turam, RK0, Todd, Hajime no James, Utku Hussein Kaya, Hai Paynon, Tori and Gales, Michael Smith, CJ and Mary, Sierra and DC, White Gilden, Justin Down, Yokota Space Whale, Cats and Soup, Chart B-Man, Ben Harradine, Metal Mama, T-Bird, Tom Ericus Prime, Boo Boo Cakes, JR Horse, Ian Farmer, and Adeye Akono. And to everyone else who is still watching right now, I guess I'll see you next year. じゃあ、またね。